Hello and welcome to a book bag extra with a few of this week's literary adventures. This is a new book bag. I went to a Profile Granta Serpent's Tail showcase this week. It was hosted by Travis Elborough, friend to the book bag. Check out my interview with him. And over the course of the evening, we listened to various writers talking about their work, writers whose books are coming up next spring. This is the book bag that I snagged at that event, and I was particularly interested in this. I've got the proof here, Orlando Whitfield's book about the art market, which sounded very exciting indeed when he started talking about it. He did a little reading. It was interviewed by Travis. All That Glitters, which is a really terrible title, I have to say. A story of friendship, fraud, and fine art. Welcome to the contemporary art world, a ruthless and glamorous arena where the rewards are limitless if you can pay the price. When Orlando Whitfield first meets Inigo Philbrick, they are students dreaming of dealing art for a living. Well, it sounds like a novel, but it's all very real. And some of the shenanigans that go on in the art world, as recorded by Orlando, are truly astounding. So look out for that. That is not coming out till next May, but I reckon it will be a good one. And then the following night, I went to a poetry reading. Sue Hubbard, God's Little Artist. It was a poetry reading by Seren Books. So there were a few Seren poets there, but Sue did a particularly brilliant reading, I think, as she always does. And this latest collection of hers tells the story of Gwen John in poetry. It's very, very touching. It was a lovely reading, and it's a beautiful little book. So that's out now. But last weekend, I had a very nice day on Saturday. I was invited to the Slightly Foxed Readers' Day. So a little bit of a word about Slightly Foxed for people who don't know what it is. It is a kind of subscription service for book lovers where you get regular magazines. I've got a couple here. And they all contain lovely essays about books that have been out for a long while. Books, they sort of bring books back to mind that you maybe have forgotten about, and also tell you all about books that you never even knew existed, but which are completely wonderful. They do reprints, lovely little hardback reprints, and they can also source books. So, they're always interested in stories of books that you have loved in the past. I've done a couple of essays for them. I did one on Hadrian VII, a wonderful novel by Frederick Rolfe. And I've got one that's coming up. It's not been published yet, about this adorable book that I read when I was a nipper. And I was delighted to find this in a secondhand bookshop because it's got the absolutely wonderful illustrations by Anthony Maitland, which are so much a part of this terrific story. I mean, just look at that, the way that he's hiding under the bed, and the way the illustration wraps around the text is absolutely beautiful. So I've done a little essay on that. This is about a young boy in the 18th century in London who is friends with a highwayman, and it's one of the most, I think it's one of the greatest children's novels ever written. Certainly up there with the Owl Service, which is for a slightly older age group. So if you are a slightly flummoxed contributor, subscriber, you get these catalogues quarterly, and once a year they have a Slightly Foxed Day, which is what I was invited to. I was invited to go to interview Stig Abel about his crime novel, debut crime novel. So we had a lot of fun. I wasn't in time, alas, to see another good friend of the book bag, DJ Taylor, who was on in the morning talking about Orwell. But when I arrived, he had to rush back to Norwich because the trains aren't in a good state at the moment. So when I arrived, everybody was talking about how brilliant he was. And the nice thing about the day, it's just, I think, 4 or 5 events, something like that. They kind of interweave. So writers will pick up something that's been said at an earlier event and expand on it. So Orwell seemed to inspire people for the whole day, as did David Taylor. So I was in time to see Sarah Wheeler, who was talking about her travel memoir, a memoir of her life in travel, called Glowing Still, which is, I mean, she is just one of the greatest and most fun travel writers that we have. So her talk was pretty much, you know, some of the very bizarre things that have happened to her along the way, on the road, on trains, on horseback. Very funny anecdote about a toilet in Antarctica. Yeah, and I think she startled a fair few people in the audience with a talk about what you do with tampons in Antarctica. We'll draw a veil. We'll draw a veil at that point. But anyway, she's hugely funny. Glowing Still is an absolutely terrific memoir. You know, how she got into writing and the various extraordinary adventures that she's had along the way, and some thoughts about whether travel writing in the future of global warming, not wishing to appropriate other voices, and so on. So a very thought-provoking, funny and interesting talk. And then I was on with Stig, who I'd only briefly met before, and we didn't even really have a chance to discuss what we were going to do. But he has a radio show, and I mean, he's done a lot of stuff on radio, so I thought he's not really going to have a problem. So all I really had to say was, Stig, I have lots of interesting questions. Let's go for it. So this is his debut crime novel, Death Under a Little Sky. We had a great time discussing it because it's a crime novel for crime aficionados, because he's so steeped in the genre. In fact, one of the things we talked about was the various trends over the years going, you know, just recently tartan noir, Scandi noir, and now cozy crime, which is a designation he really doesn't like at all. So we talked about that. But he used to edit the TLS, but crime fiction is the art form, the written art form, just the art form that he loves above anything else. So in this story, we have a retired police guy. I mean, young retired, and he inherits a house. Funnily enough, it has a library full of crime fiction in it. It's an uncle's house. That you sort of think, well, that's sort of a bit of a convenient way to start, you know. Oh, he just manages to inherit a fortune and a house. Oh, that's very convenient, isn't it? But there's a reason for it. There's some unfinished business in this sleepy, tiny, weeny little village. This is a crime novel with a very small cast indeed. And there's some unfinished business that was dear to the uncle's heart. So what he really hopes to do post-mortem is that this nephew will sort of take the lead and find out what really happened to a young woman. I think I can say that much. As I said on the day, you can't really talk in very great detail about the plot. And there were a couple of things in Death Under a Little Sky that I saw coming, and some rather more important things that I did not see coming. But we did have a good time talking about all the different crime writers like Dorothy L. Sayers came up, for example, and her novel Gaudy Night, because we had a very interesting question from the audience. Someone said, does it always have to be a murder in a crime novel? What is it? You know, obviously, murder is very devastating. It affects a wide amount of people. It's sort of the ultimate crime in a way. But does a crime novel have to entail a murder? And Stig pointed out that Gaudy Night, which is one of my very, very favourite crime novels, is actually about poison pen letters. But the atmosphere of malice that Dorothy L. Sayers creates in that novel, which is set in a fictional Oxford college, is very profound indeed. So no, you don't have to have the ultimate crime of murder in a crime novel. And it seems to me that Stig sort of plays rather brilliantly with all that he's read in crime fiction. There was one moment when I thought, if this was going to be like a famous Agatha Christie plot, then this would happen. And it didn't, but apparently he already knows what you're thinking, which is a great quality for a crime writer. So after that, we all stopped for, isn't this brilliant? We all stopped for cake and Madeira. I must admit, I think I might develop a liking for Madeira. Another book bag friend, Henry Jeffries, if you want to check out his interview on the book bag, he says if you spend 200 quid on a bottle of Madeira, it'll just be the most delicious thing you've ever tasted. I mean, this was probably not 200 quid a bottle, and it was pretty delicious, I have to say. So we stopped for Madeira and cake, extremely civilized, and then we went on to the final event, which was a talk about a slightly foxed bestseller, which is a nature writer called Adrian Bell. Now, I said that things kind of interpenetrated a bit. Death Under a Little Sky has very beautiful nature writing in it, and it's well, I won't say where it's set. It's obviously set in an English village. It was one of the things I asked Stig, actually, and he said people have said, oh, it's this county, it's that county, and nobody's ever actually guessed the county that he had in mind. But to hear Richard Hawking, who was talking about Adrian Bell, kind of fitted in to that, because Adrian Bell was a noted nature writer, English countryman. He didn't want to be. He didn't start off being. He was a townie, and then he went off to work in the countryside, maybe during the war. Let's see what it says. But I mean, he started to write very brilliantly. He also wrote for a very long time for a local newspaper it was the Eastern Daily Press. He wrote a weekly column in the Eastern Daily Press from 1950 to 1980. So his memoirs, among them Corduroy, that was his first book. Oh, I'll read a little bit here. This is from the catalogue. Adrian Bell was a rather frail young man of 20 when, in 1920, he left London to learn agriculture on a Suffolk farm. He arrived one autumn day on an old motorbike, feeling all wrong for the part. Like many townies, he assumed at first that the locals were somewhat simple, but soon his own ignorance and initial inability to do the most basic physical tasks taught him a new respect. And so his career was launched. He's a bestseller in the Slightly Foxed editions, and they are doing this rolling compendium seasonally of his best writing from his countrymen's notebooks in the Eastern Daily Press. So I think they've now done the whole. I think the final one, spring, summer, autumn, winter, has just been launched this season. So anyway, do check out Slightly Foxed. They're wonderful people. It was such a nice audience. The venue was the Art Workers Guild, hugely atmospheric, in Queen's Square in London. As I was sitting in the front row, there were all these wonderful oil paintings, all blokes, of course. But there was this chap, it was a lovely painting right in my eye line, of somebody who looked a bit like might be a Victorian bank clerk. And when I went over to have a closer look, I was amazed to see that it was the incredible delineator of fairyland, Arthur Rackham. I had no idea what he looked like, but I wouldn't have imagined that he looked like that. So beautiful venue. It's just been announced that there will be another Slightly Foxed Readers' Day next year. So I thoroughly recommend that. And I forgot to mention, of course, there's a huge fingerprint on that, which is very appropriate for talking about crime fiction, as I did with Stig Abel. So hopefully they'll invite me back next year, and hopefully you will join me again in the book bag for more book news and book interviews. And yes, I will keep you updated if you will oblige me with a like and a follow. Thank you very much.